Hi, welcome to my walkthrough of Milestone 4. This week we're working with reading and writing to files using our previously created address book mainly. So the focus on this week was obviously the file access service class. I did have to change a few things in the data access service interface. I'll show here. Um, for example, this was void before because I wasn't returning an array list. I was just reading it as a string in the last assignment. So I had to change that, and then also I had to add the file not found exception to the stub method because that's required whenever you use a file within the method. Here, you have to have the file not found exception if you are using a file within any method. So right off the bat, just a few changes to the interface that this class implements. And then I will first take you through the save all contacts, since that is the beginning of this, because we already have the list of our contacts and now we have to save them to a file. So here we have our contact list coming out of our address book, and then we have a try catch statement which works with the file, and it's going to write each contact on its own line separated by commas using the each own contact toString method. And it's going to write print lines, so it's going to write them per line instead of writing them all out. And here I'll show you the address book.text, which is the result of it writing in these contacts here. These are my two contacts, my test contacts right here. So here's my address book.text. You can see that it's separated off by commas for each property. And now let's go back to the file access service and let's look at the right here, the read all contacts method. We already went over the error, the exception here rather, and then we create the new file from our address book.text. We scan it, and we start off a new array list. That's going to be our base for what we are returning to this. Since this is not a void method, it returns an array list. So we start off by initializing an array list, and then we look at the file and we say, well, it has another line. We have to match it up with each of the with each of the properties within our contact. So here we have our first line, which or rather that's the line that it's reading off of the file, and then we split it using a comma and a space as per the toString method. And then we start off by looking at the ID. We parse the ID into an integer, and basically what we're doing is when we save it to a file, we're saving it as a string, because that a file can't hold a person contact or a business contact. So we're saving it as a string, and then when we go to return it in an array list, it needs to be of the type base contact. So we have to come back through and format each individual item as it's separated by its comma and its space, and put it back into its respective object. So that took a little bit of ingenuity here on the code to try and get everything to work correctly, and converting it from the toString. Thankfully, we know how long each of our objects are, how many items go in them, so it was easy to at least distinguish that based on size. We're not working with very variably sized objects like we might be with a jagged array. And then not a lot of changes to the console app. Obviously, the requirements were that I needed to call the read all contacts at the beginning, and then right as the program starts, and then I also need to call the save all contacts on case 6 when the user exits the program. So what it's going to do is it's going to save the contacts, and then it's going to print that the program has closed. And I'll just run that real quick just to show that everything still works. Here it comes up with a menu. It shows us all of our current contacts here. And we can show the contacts using the menu as we did before. We could show a contact by ID number. So the menu still works perfectly, and then we're going to exit, and it's going to write all the contacts back into the file. Any new contacts would be added at this point, but it doesn't append onto the file. So that Boolean value is set to false. Instead, it overwrites everything in the file. Because anytime anyone adds anything, or even if they don't, you don't want it rewriting the same people back into the address book. So that's the presentation for this week. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week.